The holiday weekend had cracked open like a ripe peach over Summer Lake. Its sweet scent of sunscreen, charcoal smoke, and cut grass drifting beyond the county line before Saturday's first light even breached the pines. Families from 3 neighboring towns funneled down Route 18. Minivans packed with paddleboards and neon pool noodles. Coffee steaming in paper cups balanced atop dashboards. By 8:30 the East Shore parking lot was near capacity. The attendant's clicker rattled like a cicada as he tallied vehicles under a sky so clean it looked polished. An hour later Kayla Thornton guided her 5-year-old son Max onto the sand. Umbrella under one arm and a weathered frisbee tucked under the other. At the end of Kayla's leash trotted Ryder, a 2-year-old red-nosed Pitbull whose musculature suggested pure bullet force, yet whose jowl-lopsided grin made strangers reconsider every prejudice they carried about broad-headed breeds. Ryder loved 2 things beyond debate: chasing airborne objects and diving after sticks hurled into any body of water deep enough to mirror the sky. Max called him the Rocket Dog, and most summer Saturdays at Summer Lake ended with Ryder soaked. Tail windmilling so fast it seemed to churn its own breeze. But this Saturday morning bore an asterisk none of them could read yet. Overnight, a perfect cocktail of still air, 80-degree water, and nutrient runoff had coaxed Microcystis aeruginosa, cyanobacteria, misleadingly nicknamed blue-green algae, into a silent bloom. It began as microscopic colonies rolling upward from the lakebed, then fused into slimy rafts the color of weathered jade. From shore, the water still looked postcard clear. Surface ripples fractured sunlight into silver shards. Only a thin sheen traced the inner cove, so faint it resembled spilled gasoline. Birds, sensitive barometers, had long since abandoned the inlet, wings marking X-shaped refusals overhead. Ryder trotted nose down along the sand, claws sinking where midnight waves had woven scallop ridges. 20 paces from the picnic blanket someone lobbed a tennis ball. Ryder's instincts flared. He launched toward the splash zone. But midway his stride hiccuped. Head craned, nostrils flared, pupils narrowing at the green smear lapping shore rocks. He braked so abruptly that sand geysered. Frisbee flies aborted. Conversation murmurs pitched. Kayla called after him, thinking he'd spotted a turtle. Ryder ignored her, hackles rippling in a low wave that stopped short of aggression. More like a barometer needle spiking. Max ran to retrieve the ball. But Ryder pivoted, placing his body between child and lake. He barked, sharp syllables that ricocheted off cooler lids and half-inflated flamingo floats. People paused, surprised. Ryder rarely wasted voice unless coaxing squirrels from branches. Kayla jogged over, ready to apologize for the disturbance. Max reached for Ryder's collar. The dog sidestepped, ears back, gaze locked on water surface. A fresh wave lapped, thicker this time. A ribbon of emerald slush. Ryder growled, not at people, but at the lake itself. Within minutes, beachgoers resumed chatter, chalking Ryder's outburst to canine quirk. A father launched a kayak. A teenager sprinted for the floating dock. Ryder, leash now clasped but taut as piano wire, whined, dragging Kayla toward a cluster of toddlers at shoreline. Scooping mud into buckets, she tightened grip, uttering soothing nonsense. Ryder's muscles bunched. He barked again, 3 escalating blasts. Parents looked up, concerned now. At that moment a dead sunfish bobbed to surface. Belly silver, pectoral fins splayed like broken fans. Then another, smaller, drifted against a girl's inflatable rein. She screamed, panic spider webbed. Kayla knelt, scanning water, where sun had once sparkled diamond clean. A film now crept, viscous and dull. She noticed Ryder's nostrils rimmed with green flecks. He'd sniffed the bloom particle cloud. His muzzle was already stained like war paint. A lifeguard jogged over, whistle dangling. "Ma'am, leash stays short," he began, but stopped when Kayla pointed at the fish. His gaze darted across waterline, jaw set. He blew a sequence blasts reserved for evacuation. Whistles echoed from towers. Commands rippled, everyone out, like wind slapping a tent. Ryder barked between whistle shrieks. Herding stragglers, kids still paddling in shallows. Adults lugging coolers. One little boy froze, ankle deep, fascinated by lime-colored foam swirling around his shins. Ryder lunged, pulling Kayla forward until she unclipped the leash on reflex. Dog met boy, nudging tiny hands away from water, pushing with gentle chest bumps until the child stumbled backward onto dry sand where a panicked mother scooped him up. Smartphone cameras flicked alive, catching Ryder galloping perimeter arcs, corralling humans away from shoreline like a sheepdog steering a flock from shearing blades. Downshore, Ranger Tomas Cruz of the State Park Service received the lifeguard's radio call. He pivoted his ATV toward the main beach, tires churning sand, familiar with cyanobacteria outbreaks in late summer. He'd never fielded one this early, but climate patterns had grown less predictable than dice. As he approached, more fish corpses surfaced, eyes milky. Ryder's barking carried above motor drone. Cruz keyed mic. Need water testing kit. Level 3 bloom suspected. Dispatch crackled. A second ranger loaded gear. Cruz skidded to a halt near Kayla. He donned nitrile gloves, waded in thigh-high with a sampling bottle. The water released a faint smell, sweet, almost fruity, undercut by decay. He capped the vial, sealed it. Ryder watched, leaning forward, but when Kayla's fingers brushed fur still smeared with bloom residue, he whined, perhaps sensing her worry. She wiped his muzzle with a towel. Green streaks blossomed across white cotton like evil ink. Back on shore, Cruz performed a rapid test strip, an indicator that changed color in presence of microcystins. The strip darkened to a menacing indigo within seconds. He ordered full beach closure, radioing paramedics to stand by for potential exposure symptoms, nausea, skin rashes, respiratory distress. Over loudspeakers, a recorded evacuation message played twice in English, once in Spanish. Swimmers shuffled toward parking lot carrying shivering kids, towels pressed to mouths. Some coughed already, psychosomatic or first hints. No one knew. Telephoto lenses from weekenders' cell phones captured Ryder pacing, posture oscillating between urgency and relief as last stragglers retreated. One clip, later stitched into viral montages, showed him grabbing a forgotten flip-flop and dropping it at its owner's feet. A doting but deliberate reminder, time to leave. County hazmat arrived within the hour. Full protective suits waited to install floating booms restricting bloom spread. Drone footage revealed an aerial stain, emerald marbled with darker streaks, covering half the cove. News outlets dispatched vans. Anchors practiced pronunciations of cyanobacteria between makeup touches. Kayla sat in her Subaru with Ryder sprawled across backseat, monitoring him for ingestion signs, drool, weakness, tremors. A sympathetic medic scanned his vitals, heart strong, gums pink, and advised charcoal slurry if any bloom had been licked. Vet clinics on emergency call readied anti-toxin IVs. But Ryder remained bright-eyed, though subdued, as if adrenaline still flooded cells. Kayla realized he'd rejected his beloved stick hours earlier because he smelled the bloom before anyone saw it, a sensory alarm no test strip could match until water touched plastic. By sunset, county officials issued a public health advisory: Summer Lake closed indefinitely. Ranger Cruz's water samples, rushed to state lab, measured microcystin concentrations 15 times higher than recreational safety thresholds. News at 11 aired split screen. Microscope slide glowing with cyanophage-laden cells. Phone video of Ryder herding splash-happy toddlers. Interview with marine toxicologist Dr. Faith Larimer explaining how a single mouthful could trigger liver failure in pets, or worse. Children. Overnight social media crowned Ryder the Algae Avenger. Bloggers lauded Pitbull perception, while scientists debated olfactory cues. Cyanotoxins release geosmin. Earthy funk dogs detect 1,000-fold below human threshold. Animal behavior experts requested hair samples, eager to study stress hormones pre- and post-incident. In days following, local officials scrambled to address root causes. Fertilizer runoff from upstream farms. Septic systems leaking nitrates. Warming climate lengthening bloom season. Kayla, shy by nature, found herself at packed council meetings presenting Ryder's role as sentinel and arguing for year-round predictive monitoring. Slide after slide displayed fish kill counts, boat rental revenue losses, testimonials from asthmatic kids whose beach memories now included inhalers and fear. Every slide ended with Ryder's stop-motion bark, a punctuation no official could ignore. Within a month, county commissioners approved funding for continuous algae sensor buoys. satellite data subscriptions, and public alert apps. A local tech firm donated development time, branding the platform RyderWatch, a paw icon overlaying a wave. Push notifications would warn residents whenever chlorophyll alpha spiked beyond safe limits, eliminating reliance on human lifeguards spotting dead fish long after toxins peaked. State environmental grants followed. Agricultural networks piloted buffer zone incentive programs, paying farmers to plant riparian vegetation trapping phosphates before they bled into streams feeding Summer Lake. High school STEM clubs built low-cost turbidity meters, testing tributaries weekly. None of these solutions barked, but all wore Diesel's philosophy: presence before catastrophe. Meanwhile, Ryder underwent advanced scent discrimination training at the Diesel Carter Center. In controlled labs he learned to differentiate between harmless algal mats and microcystin-producing strains, signaling with a paw tap rather than bark to conserve energy during prolonged patrols. Trainers documented his 93% accuracy, surpassing electronic fluorometers in choppy water where sensors misread suspended silt. A peer-reviewed paper, co-authored by Rowan Cho, landed in Journal of Environmental Safety, stirring debate about integrating biosentinels with tech arrays. Months rolled into summer again. The newly cleansed spring runoff arrived low in nutrients, and sensor buoys showed safe tolerances. Officials scheduled a cautious reopening ceremony. Kayla and Ryder, requested as guests of honor, arrived modestly, Kayla clutching a leash, Ryder wearing a green bandana embroidered with blue-green waves crossed by a red caution symbol. Drone cameras buzzed overhead capturing ribbon cut. When the official speech ended, volunteers unfurled an enormous banner, "Thank you Ryder, protector of Summer Lake." Children raced to water's edge, but lifeguards paused them until real-time readings flashed green on a big LED board. An announcer invited Ryder to perform the ceremonial first fetch. Kayla threw a biodegradable stick, but Ryder stopped short, sniffed, then looked to Kayla, wagging gently, "Water safe." But his heart now tied more to prevention than play. Kayla laughed, pocketed the stick, and instead led Ryder along the shoreline where sensor buoys bobbed like compliant fireflies. The crowd cheered anyway. They understood hero work redefined pleasure. That evening, news loops framed reopening not merely as rebound but as model. Headlines: Pitbull points the way to bloom-free future. Environmental podcasts dissected the chain reaction. One dog's refusal, right pointing arrow rapid closure, right pointing arrow catalytic policy, right pointing arrow sustained restoration. Even skeptics conceded, strict causal proof elusive, but correlation undeniable. Autumn painted hardwoods burnt umber. Ryder patrolled lake trails off-duty. Content to let sensors hum. Yet each breeze shift still sent his nose twitching, scanning chemical conversations invisible to human eyes. Kayla felt a humble awe whenever she caught him in those moments, a reminder that survival often begins in instincts we domesticate but never fully understand. Years later, long after Ryder's muzzle frosted and his paws slowed, scientists still cited Summer Lake as proof that community vigilance plus canine intuition could beat the ticking clock of algal blooms exacerbated by climate change. A law professor coined Ryder's rule in environmental litigation seminars: when non-experts raise a credible alert, agencies bear burden to test before dismissing risk. The phrase entered case law after a coastal city referenced it in defense of whistleblower beach closures. On Ryder's final summer, now too arthritic for marathon patrols, Kayla placed a water bowl near the same shore where green sheen once threatened. Sensor display glowed steady green behind them. Children paddled, parents lounged without worry, and gulls skimmed clear water where fish swam belly down. Alive, Ryder's cloudy eyes tracked waves, his tail thumped a memory beat. Kayla knelt, stroking fur made sparse by age. She whispered, "Edge secure," words Diesel had bequeathed through time. Ryder sighed, head resting on her palm. No alarm sounded, but across the lake a buoy blinked, an LED heartbeat acknowledging calm. Within calm lived vigilance. Within vigilance, the legacy of a pitbull who once barked at emerald ghosts and taught a whole county to listen. Dawn seeped across the Atlantic like diluted gold when the Ocean Guard early warning dashboard at NOAA's Norfolk Center flared from serene teal to urgent orange. A new data tile pulsed on the eastern seaboard layer, an algal chlorophyll spike hugging the Virginia Capes, 30 kilometers offshore. The reading itself wasn't unprecedented. Seasonal blooms ghosted these waters every few years. What startled analysts was the speed curve. Remote sensing satellites registered a doubling of pigment density in just 6 hours. A surge consistent with Carenia brevis, the same red tide dinoflagellate whose brevitoxins had poisoned Florida manatees and shut down Gulf desalination plants a decade earlier. Mercy Harcourt, lead oceanographer on shift, zoomed the spectral panel. Heat map gradients resembled a bruise unfurling on the sea's skin. She tapped the intercom. Trigger Level 2 protocol. Coastal desalination intake checks. Aquaculture alerts. Her voice stayed calm. But the intake valves for Hampton Roads' new desal facility drew 11 million gallons per day. Toxins that could paralyze the Chesapeake's freshwater buffer. Level 2 mandated water grabs from manned vessels. But choppy spring squalls had ports on small craft advisories. Mercy pivoted to NOAA's fledgling BioSentinel extension, K9 teams stationed at strategic coastlines. Trained to verify satellite flags. The program, now in its 3rd year, owed its existence to a case study titled, Ryder at Summer Lake. Dogs' noses had proven uniquely adept at smelling brevitoxin's faintly peppery odor long before lab chromatography confirmed its presence. Thanks to volatile organic compounds riding sea spray, Mercy pinged the Mid-Atlantic Hub, BioSentinel Alpha Wave team. On duty was Handler Sergeant Layla Osman and her partner, Beacon, a brindle and white Pitbull mix bred from the same genetic line that Rowan Cho's lab had identified for hyper-olfaction and high empathy. Beacon's adoption dossier once marked him overreactive to water hoses, under PB4C protocols. That hyper-focus had been harnessed, not suppressed. At 7:10 Eastern Standard Time, Layla roused Beacon from the kennel at Cape Story Beach. Offshore cross-chop tossed foam crests like torn envelopes. Layla zipped a high-visibility flotation vest over Beacon's harness, embedded in the fabric. A micro-sensor package would transmit his positional data and toxin detection timestamps. The dog's nose twitched, sampling marine breeze. No alarm yet. A Coast Guard rigid inflatable boat, ribbed, throttled beside the pier. Coxswain shouting above diesel clatter, 5-mile perimeter. West by north. Beacon leapt aboard with practiced grace, Layla followed, clipping a tether carabiner to her belt. Mercy's dashboard updated, Alpha Wave deployed. 15 minutes later, the rib idled at GPS waypoint inside the bloom's predicted fringe. Beacon, nose lifted to wind, drew a rapid inhale, then sneezed, a reset common before an alert. Layla unclipped a collapsible ramp. Beacon moved forward, head low, sampling boundary currents. Suddenly his posture stiffened, ears back, paw lifted. He emitted a low groan, pre-signal, then sat hard, raising his right paw twice. The onboard algorithm interpreted 2 paw lifts equals positive brevitoxin signature. Helmet cam fed real-time video to Norfolk. Mercy's console flashed crimson. Within moments, desalination intake valves downstream auto-sealed. Aquaculture operators received push notifications. Crabbers recalled pots. A sea kayak regatta postponed launch. Coast Guard cutters redeployed containment booms around sensitive marsh inlets. Back on the rib, Layla rewarded Beacon with dehydrated salmon bites, then produced a sterile gauze pad. Beacon sniff-nosed it. Layla sealed the patch in a vial, olfactory evidence for lab crosscheck. They repeated sweeps at 2 more coordinates. Beacon signaled positive each time, precisely bracketing the bloom front. Lab analysis later measured brevitoxin at 0.12 micrograms per liter, dangerous for shellfish harvesting. Days ahead of satellite-only confirmation cycle. News outlets scrambled, but this time narrative carried flip side, crisis averted. Headlines. Dogs and data saved Chesapeake from red tide shutdown. Mercy's team credited the early break to RyderWatch algorithms integrated with BioSentinel units. In interviews, Mercy highlighted the multi-layer defense, spaceborne eyes, buoy sensors, and noses, wired over millions of years to read chemical Morse code humans barely register. While Beacon's footage looped on cable networks, Julia Marsh reviewed post-incident analytics from Ivy Glen. PB4C's Edge Secure philosophy had leapt from lakes to open oceans. She pinged Rowan Cho. Edge is now planetary. Rowan replied with a single emoji. World map wrapped by a paw print. Preparations intensified for Melbourne launch. On the flight south, Julia carried Diesel's bronze key in her carry-on. At Tullamarine Airport she was met by Dr. Sienna Kaur, head of Australia's Coastal Safety Authority, and Quokka, a stout blue fawn pitbull whose tail wagged in windmill loops. Quokka would anchor the Southern Hemisphere Biosentinel network, patrolling estuaries where deadly cyanobacteria mingled with box jellyfish nurseries, edges stacked upon edges. Opening day at Melbourne's Diesel-class campus dawned bright. Magpies warbling overhead. Julia inserted the ornate key into wrought iron gates, tumblers clicked. Cameras flashed. Schoolchildren cheered. In her speech Julia reframed heroism. It begins when someone, or some dog, refuses to accept that danger must be visible before it is real. She cited Ryder, Beacon, Diesel, a lineage proving that instinct plus infrastructure rewrites odds. After ribbon cut, trainees led dogs through scent tunnels emitting diluted antitoxin aerosols. Quokka nailed every sit signal. Aussie press, initially skeptical of imported dog solutions, left with footage of precision that overshadowed cynicism. Weeks later, a cyclone-fueled flood flushed agricultural runoff into Queensland's Fitzroy River Delta. Satellite turbidity masks failed under dense silt, but Quokka, deployed by boat, alerted to toxic Anabaena bloom days before livestock troughs drew water. Emergency chlorination drones activated. Thousands of cattle and countless human residents avoided exposure. The diesel doctrine had crossed hemispheres intact. Back in Westbrook, Meridian enjoyed semi-retirement, visiting schools with Rowan. During an elementary assembly, a first grader asked why dogs would care about human toxins. Rowan knelt, responding, "Because the world they smell is our world too. Saving it for us saves it for them." Meridian punctuated this with a gentle woof, earning laughter that rang unburdened by fear. On Julia's 60th birthday, Presence Before Catastrophe released a 10-year impact report. 0 child fatalities at sensor-equipped lakes and beaches. 78 algae blooms verified early by canine sentinels, averting $91 million in healthcare and mitigation costs. 12 freight line communities protected from potential hazmat disasters after dogs alerted to solvent leaks invisible to sensors warped by storm debris. 4 countries licensing PB4C curriculum, with 2 more in negotiation. The report concluded with Diesel's silhouette watermark beneath the words, "Edges notice US when we notice them." That winter Julia sat once more on Ivy Glen bench, now fitted with solar-powered plaques that displayed live data of global canine alerts, a digital pulse bridging continents. Snow kissed the bronze dog. A distant freight horn drifted across starlight. Julia whispered, "Edge secure," knowing the phrase now traveled through satellites, servers, and, most reliably, through a legion of wet noses scanning winds humans hadn't yet learned to name. Somewhere in coastal haze Beacon sniffed a breeze off brackish water. Halfway round the world Quokka did the same. Different skies, same promise. And in that unbroken chain, Diesel to Ryder to Beacon to countless unnamed pups at the threshold of training, humankind learned to listen sooner, act faster, and cherish the quiet where catastrophe once waited. Cloud-filtered moonlight shimmered across the Atlantic as Beacon lay curled on the deck of NOAA research cutter Calypso 3. His brindled ribs rising and falling in time with the gentle heave of 3-foot swells. Above him, aluminum masts clacked against halyard reins, producing a chiming counterpoint to low diesel rumble. The cutter ghosted 50 nautical miles off Cape Hatteras, the graveyard of the Atlantic, where 2 cold currents braided and birthed weather on a whim. Tonight's mission: ground truth and anomaly discovered not by satellites but by Beacon's own nose during a routine shoreline patrol 24 hours earlier. Sensor fallout. Ever since red tide breathed toxin nearly infiltrated the Chesapeake intakes, PB4C's Ops Center assigned redundancy tiers. Tier 1, spaceborne and buoy sensors. Tier 2, autonomous surface drones. Tier 3, canine sentinels. In theory Tier 1 would sound first. Practice kept humbling theory. A late-season nor'easter had scattered phytoplankton so thoroughly that satellite spectral pics resembled faint watercolor stains, nothing to trigger an automatic threat tile. Yet during sunset rounds, Beacon had paused on False Cape State Park's boardwalk, head cocked toward a breeze flecked with salt and something else, cracked pepper sharp. Faint but insistent, he had pivoted, given 2 deliberate paw taps, then settled into his stare-sit signal. Layla Osman had trusted that signal enough to collect aerosol swabs on cotton pads and rush them to the Diesel Center's mobile GCMS van. Chromatograph peaks revealed breathed toxin subparts per billion, a faint but rising plume. They triangulated predicted drift and dispatched Calypso 3 to hunt bloom source before it matured. Canine Genetics Lab, Rowan's breakthrough. Rows of LED grow lights flickered at the Diesel Carter Center's genetics wing where Dr. Rowan Cho hovered over a holographic protein model display. Her team had just finished CRISPR screening saliva samples from Beacon's littermates, mapping olfactory receptor gene OR5K3 variants that responded to breathed toxin VOC conjugate. The same gene cluster was conspicuously active in archival swabs from Diesel, Ryder, Meridian, and Quokka, a convergent aroma syndrome seldom seen outside scenthound breeds. Rowan dubbed it Edgemark Delta. She believed Edgemark Delta acted as a molecular antenna tuned to metabolic byproducts of cyanobacteria and dinoflagellate toxins. Tonight, raw data scrolled like star fields across a wall-size monitor. A bright green node at Graph Center represented Beacon's allele combination, a twin spike to Diesel's. Despite no bloodline linkage, selective rescue, Rowan murmured, marveling at chance. Shelters had unknowingly stockpiled nature's early warning system. Papers were half-drafted, bioethicists already emailing concerns about commercial breeders exploiting the discovery. Rowan drafted guidelines. Any Edgemark Delta-positive dog must remain under nonprofit stewardship. Profit motives diluted vigilance ethos. Aboard the Calypso 3, at 0200, Beacon jerked awake. He sniffed, nostrils pulsing. Layla, catnapping beside a sonar console, saw his hackles lift. She keyed intercom. Captain, Beacon's on alert. The bridge lights dimmed. Captain Ruiz throttled engines to idle. Briny wind slapped faces as crew assembled portside with sampling nets. Beacon moved to the bow. Nose over gunnel. 2 rapid sneezes. His threshold breach. Tell. Layla slipped a life vest on him, unclipped leash, and uttered the deploy cue. Seek. Beacon leapt onto an extended swim platform, lowering head to black water. He extended paw toward surface but held back. Toxins often rode microaerosols, no need to ingest. Layla fetched a stainless cylinder sampler. Delegated deckhand Manny Nguyen to collect at Beacon's indicated bearing. The dog paced starboard, pawing air until Manny dropped bottle. When it surfaced, iridescent burgundy swirled inside, living paint. Fluorometer readouts in the lab bay spiked. Carenia confirmed. The chief scientist barked. Captain Ruiz radioed Coast Guard Command. Calypso 3 confirms active bloom at 35 degrees 06.8 N 74 degrees 44.2 W. Advise immediate shipping lane advisory. Activate desal contingency. Within minutes, Marine Safety Bulletin lit merchant fleet dashboards. A Singapore-flagged container ship rerouted 12 nanometers west. Desalination plant at Nag's Head started chlorine pulse prophylaxis. Economic loss minimal. Ecological disaster averted. Beacon, meanwhile, downed 250 milliliters of electrolyte broth and curled at Lila's boots. Data packet stamped edge secure zipped to Norfolk and onward to PB4C servers in Melbourne, Cape Town, and Wellington. International legal front, Ryder's rule at sea. Across the world, in a sleek glass tower overlooking Copenhagen's harbor, maritime lawyer Dr. Ingrid Soren reviewed the final UN draft of the International Maritime Environmental Prevention Accord, IMEPA. Article 7b, colloquially, Ryder's rule, required commercial vessels above 20.000 GT to consult multi-level bloom alerts, including certified canine verification where available, before performing ballast water exchange within 50 kilometers of coast. Shipping lobbyists had fought the clause, calling it dog-based delay. But video from Calypso 3 strengthened proponents. Dogs were no longer feel-good mascots, they were data nodes. The clause included funding. 0.02% of global freight fees allocated to PB4C licensed centers to train Edgemark Delta dogs for ports lacking sensor budgets. Ingrid penned closing remarks for next week's General Assembly, quoting Diesel's famous mantra, "Presence before catastrophe," casting it now as global maritime ethos. Field logs, Quokka in Queensland. Simultaneously, Quokka pressed her own legacy. Ranger J. Patel's field log from Gladstone Harbour read, 14:32 Australian Eastern Standard Time. Quokka indicated with low growl at stormwater outlet. 14:35. Water test strip NADH oxidized, possible antitoxin A. 14:50. City engineers traced upstream fertilizer leak. Sealed valve before evening tide. Outcome: prevented bloom in mangrove nursery. Rowan's team compared Quokka's oxide alert allele expression. Edgemark Delta again. Meridian's sunset. In Westbrook, Meridian's breaths were now shallow. Her muzzle white as seafoam. Rowan knelt beside her as veterinarian injected a light sedative for comfort. Outside, students at the Diesel Center lined walkway holding arced leads spelling thank you. Julia dialed in from Melbourne. Beacon's handler Layla from Norfolk. Quokka's team from Brisbane. A global zoom grid of tear-filled faces watched Meridian's chest still. Rowan whispered, "Edge secure. Girl." The center's bell tolled once, tradition since Diesel's passing. Meridian's ashes were mixed with cyanobacteria eating phage spores and poured into Summer Lake. Symbolic circle. Dog turned defender turned microbial safeguard. Edge forecast 2040. Within a year, IMEPA ratified. The first cohort of port-stationed canines, callsign Harbor Sentinels, took posts from Rotterdam to Lagos. Each harness carried a tiny inscription, in memory of Diesel. Ryder, Meridian, we listen. Real-time dashboards plotted thousands of paw icon panes, each marking an edge noticed and neutralized. At PB4C headquarters, Julia hung a world map dotted with teal LEDs. Every time a canine alert synced with averted contamination. An LED lit. One quiet midnight she stood alone in that room. The board shimmered like a low-orbit starfield. She pressed a hand over her heart, imagining Diesel's barrel chest beneath her palm all those years ago. She whispered, "We've shifted the darkness back." Outside, freight horns sounded distant lullabies, lake sensors pulsed undramatic green. New trainees in kennels dreamed behind twitching paws. And the planet breathed, slightly cleaner. Slightly safer, because a lineage of dogs had taught humanity to smell peril in the breeze and choose to act while there was still ordinary air left to inhale. Moonless black pooled over the Pacific, its surface stippled only by scattered bioluminescent plankton that flashed when the research catamaran Vigilance 1 sliced through the water southwest of Palau. Every deck light was red filtered to keep night vision sharp. Yet even in that subdued glow the newest Edge Sentinel team was easy to spot. Handler Lieutenant Aiko Matsuda in a windproof jumpsuit the color of kelp. And at her side Kai. A compact, steel-gray Pitbull with impossible amber eyes. At 29 months, Kai was the first dog purpose-trained on synthetic toxin analogs, odor molecules that didn't yet exist outside lab predictions but were forecast to accompany climate-accelerated trichodesmium, sea sawdust, blooms. The mission tonight was wholly preemptive. Satellites had begun to pick up borderline anomalies, slightly elevated chlorophyll B signatures in the lee of a converging current. Still an order of magnitude below any known risk. But PB4C's predictive model, now integrated with ocean circulation AI and Edgemark Delta canine markers, flagged the area as an emergent edge. In short, nothing might happen yet, or something entirely new could ignite. Presence before catastrophe had evolved into anticipation of catastrophe. Synthetic odor training, Rowan's legacy. 5 years after mapping Edgemark Delta, Dr. Rowan Cho's lab had taken another leap, using quantum chemistry models to predict VOX, volatile organic compounds, of future algal toxins. Then hiring fragrance industry chemists to synthesize safe analogs. Dogs like Kai were imprinted on these ghost scents. giving humanity sensory eyes on threats that technically did not yet exist. Critics dubbed it sci-fi folly until Beacon's cohort pre-flagged a breed toxin mutation 6 weeks before it spiked in Chesapeake samples. Kai's nose twitched as the catamaran throttled down. Iko unhooked a tether, slipping an LED collar set to purple, PB4C protocol for prospective scouting tier. Kai padded to port rail, nostrils flaring. For 10 minutes he simply breathed. Storing scent libraries. Nothing. Iko exhaled, half relieved. The captain started to ease throttles back up when Kai froze, ears lancing forward, and delivered an unprecedented signal. One paw lift, one bark, then a retreat step. The code, drilled only weeks earlier, signified, ghost odor hit, trace. Iko's heart skipped. She radioed bridge, ghost hit alpha. Mark coordinate. Crew deployed rosette bottles. Surface water looked clean, but under red deck lights a faint mahogany tint swirled as if an artist had washed a brush laden with sepia ink. Samples sealed, refrigerated, tagged. Lab spectrometry later revealed a novel polyether compound closely matching Rowan's synthetic model #Delta T220. Preprint journals would call it palotoxin, a molecule 30% more hepatotoxic than microcystin. The Palau government, already partnering with PB4C on coral resilience, issued a precautionary no-swim advisory 3 days before satellite algorithms flagged any danger. Local fishermen grumbled, until baitfish started floating up exactly where the advisory perimeters had been drawn. Lives and the region's tourism season were spared. Global Cascade, the diesel index. Back in Westbrook, Julia Marsh updated the massive LED world map. Another teal light flickered on near Palau. She'd begun calling the constellation the diesel index. Each light was a saved edge. When the count hit 1,000, a soft chime played across the Diesel Carter campus PA, not a celebration, but a heartbeat. Rowan Cho, now Chief Scientific Officer of PB4C International, convened a virtual summit. Marine biologists, veterinary geneticists, AI ethicists. Agenda: whether to scale ghost odor programs worldwide. Some cautioned that chasing hypothetical toxins could strain budgets. Others argued climate curveballs demanded early nets. Ultimately, consensus mirrored Diesel's first lesson: act when the dog says act. Maritime adoption, ghost sentinels. Under the freshly ratified IMEPA 2.0, major port authorities began hosting ghost sentinel kennels. In Yokohama, Kai's littermate Kiri detected a trace signature of predicted domoic acid analogues 48 hours before shellfish tests failed. In Rotterdam, a dog named Fenway flagged a benzaldehyde derivative plume, leading inspectors to an illegal chemical offload before leaks reached estuaries. Insurance giants noticed. Actuarial tables showed ports with canine preempt teams filed 42% fewer contamination claims. Premium incentives followed, which funded more training, a self-reinforcing loop. RYDERWATCH 3.0, Citizen Science. Meanwhile, the RyderWatch app matured into a citizen science powerhouse. Using cheap plug-in VOC sensors for phones, beachgoers could capture air chem spectra. Machine learning models cross-checked uploads against canine alert history. Refining geographic risk grids. Rowan's latest paper credited distributed noses, organic and silicon. Phage-fused legacy. Meridian's phage-infused ashes had successfully seeded Summer Lake with cyanophage populations tuned to microcystin producers. 5 bloom seasons later, the lake remained toxin-free despite temperatures exceeding past threshold years. Ecologists hailed it as symbiosis guided by grief. Julia's final porch talk. On the 20th anniversary of Diesel's night run, Julia, nearing 70, hosted a livestream from Ivy Glen Bench. No grand stage, just her, the bronze dog, and a twilight chorus. She spoke of edges that had receded like low tide because people chose to hear the dogs before hearing the sirens. She announced her transition to emeritus advisor, passing executive reins to Rowan Cho. Comments scrolled like a waterfall, thanks from ports, lakeside moms, freight engineers. Behind Julia, a freight train glided past, horn low like an animal at peace. Sensor lights stayed teal. Somewhere in the world, Kai nosed the wind. Beacon dozed by a console. Quokka sprinted across tidal flats. Fenway guarded the Rhine Delta, an unbroken relay. Julia ended with the words etched into every PB4C harness tag. The stream faded to Diesel's silhouette overlaying a planet slowly turning beneath a lattice of teal points. Each light a place where catastrophe found no foothold. And the dogs kept listening. Moonrise leaned scarlet against the atmosphere's rim when the International Exo-Ecology Council's cargo shuttle Aurora Delta slipped into Mars orbit. Its heat tiles glowing like dragon scales. Inside the forward habitat module, mission specialist Dr. Rowan Cho checked harnesses on 3 sleeping dogs, Kai, Quokka, and Fenway. Microgravity had rocked them into an easy doze. Paws twitching as if running through air the planet below had sacrificed long ago. Each wore a slim sensor vest, the first canine life support rigs rated for extraterrestrial EVA, and inside each vest pulsed the edge-marked Delta gene cluster. Now famous enough to earn its own page in the net Lex. 26 Earth years had passed since a restless Pitbull named Diesel blocked a freight train on a quiet American track. In that time his lineage of vigilance had spread across 5 continents and 2 oceans. Tonight it was leaving the second one entirely. Why dogs on Mars? Terraforming architects had seeded crater lakes in Valles Marineris with armored strains of cyanobacteria engineered to exhale oxygen and trap carbon dioxide. Over the past decade, sensor buoys showed steady gains in dissolved O, but also sporadic readings of synthetic neurotoxins, byproducts unanticipated by Earthside models. Automated spectrometers caught anomalies hours after bloom peaks, jeopardizing maintenance crews who arrived too late with neutralizing phages. The Exo-Ecology Council recalled a century-old lesson: when instruments lag, trust the nose. No existing AI matched a dog's ability to decode volatile chemistry and swirling atmospheres. So PB4C, now headquartered on 2 hemispheres and partnered with Space Allied, trained Edge Sentinel dogs for Martian duty, nicknamed Red Guardians. Rowan had argued for their inclusion by citing the presence before catastrophe doctrine. Act at first whisper. Especially on a planet where medevac to Earth was an impossibility. Touchdown at Chrysalis Base. Aurora Delta docked with the inflatable habitat ring christened Chrysalis. Amber dust storms boiled on the horizon, but the landing zone remained tranquil beneath a field of reflectors bouncing pale sunlight onto algae ponds. When the airlock cycled, Kai sniffed first, pupils flaring at scents no human could parse, polymer seals. Regolith tang, faint trace of perchlorate, no alarm. Fenway and Quokka followed, tails high despite reduced gravity. Their first patrol targeted Basin 12, where sensor telemetry indicated fluctuating pH. Rowan, wearing an exosuit painted with PB4C teal stripes, unclipped Kai's tether within the transparent greenhouse corridor. The dog floated forward, claws lightly raking traction patches. At hatch B12 he sat, paws anchored, and gave a single bark, compressed by helmet mics into a sharp modulation that fed directly into rover diagnostics. Bark type 01 meant, no threat, baseline logged. They moved on. At Basin 14 Kai halted again, but this time his body coiled. Fur along shoulders bristling under suit straps. 2 paw lifts. Then a backward scoot. Fenway caught the plume next. Giving corroborative paw taps, Quokka lay flat, her highest alert. Rowan's HUD flashed crimson, potential toxin presence. She triggered an airtight seal and isolated the basin remotely. Fluid drones inside glass channels illuminated deep crimson, a rogue bloom. Automated neutralizer pumps fired, dispersing phage cocktails. Disaster averted 23 minutes faster than optical sensors would have warned. Martian midnight reflection. Hours later inside Chrysalis Common Pod. The dogs floated tethered to cushioned walls. Bellies rising in low-gravity rhythm. Rowan composed a quick log entry for Earth. Edge secure. Even 200 million kilometers away. Diesel's echo detected toxins unknown to any genome, before instruments. Before physics caught breath. We build machines to listen. But hearts that listen first still beat in furred chests. Her words streamed to Ivy Glen where Julia, by now honorary chair emerita and centenarian, listened via augmented reality headset from a hospice overlooking Summer Lake. Still bloom-free. She smiled faintly, whispering to the long-gone dog she'd once called friend, "Your circle touches another world." Last light. Weeks passed. Martial sunrises dusted everything in rose gold. Redwood seedlings, grown in pressurized nurseries, took root in oxygen tents. And whenever faint chemical whispers curled through the half-terraformed air, a trio of Pitbull guardians lifted their noses, deciphering messages borne on alien winds. In time, future colonists would forget the day toxins almost erased Basin 14, or the freight train that almost crushed a sleeping child under moonlit rails. But inside every edge sentinel harness, on Earth or Mars, remained a stitched line. Heroes' names faded, their principles endured, encoded in genes, in algorithms, in lamppost bronze and Martian soil alike. And somewhere, in valleys yet unnamed, a red-nosed Pitbull descendant would trot beneath twin moons, guarding humanity's newest edge, listening so that life, whether melon-smelling algae or wide-eyed child, could go on unworried. Unaware, utterly free, the dogs kept listening, the edges kept retreating, and the whisper of catastrophe, once loud enough to rattle a midnight freight, became at last just another note in a symphony of well-tended worlds.